In the music world, we often celebrate the voices, the stars who shine on stage. But what about the people behind the scenes? The people who create the soul of the music? Today we tell the story of Hank Cochran, a great songwriter who wrote timeless lyrics for legends. From Patsy Cline's I Fall to Pieces to Eddy Arnold's Make the World Go Away, he created some of the deepest emotions in country music. Despite his illustrious writing career, Hank Cochran's life was filled with tragedy and contradictions. This is not only the story of a genius, but also a deeply human story of pain, generosity, and the price of extraordinary talent. To truly understand the soul of Hank Cochran's music, you have to travel back to the world that forged him. He was born Garland Perry Cochran on August 2, 1935, in a tiny, almost forgotten speck on the map, Isola, Mississippi. This wasn't just the rural South, this was the absolute crushing depths of the Great Depression. For a poor, struggling family in the Mississippi Delta, life extremely hard. Hope for many felt like a foreign concept, an unaffordable luxury. Young Hank's earliest years were not marked by the carefree innocence we associate with childhood, but rather by the creeping dread of instability, the gnawing anxiety that permeated every aspect of existence. His parents' marriage, like so many others, fractured under the immense, unrelenting pressure of poverty, the constant strain of making ends meet. When they finally separated, the bottom truly fell out of his already precarious world. In an act of pure desperation, a heart-wrenching choice no parent should ever have to make, his father made the agonizing decision to give Hank and his younger brother Justin up for care. They were sent to St. Peter's Orphanage in Memphis, Tennessee. The world for a child suddenly shrank to echoing hallways, strict, unyielding routines, and the constant, aching, visceral absence of family. It was here, amidst the regimented silence, the shared loneliness of forgotten children, that a deep-seated longing for connection, for belonging, for a home, began to burn inside him. That profound, almost spiritual yearning would become the very ink in his pen, the foundational emotional truth for every song he would ever write. Every ballad of lost love, every ode to home, every yearning for connection, it all began in those lonely Memphis nights. But Hank Cochran was not by nature built for confinement. He possessed a restless spirit, an untamed fire that simply could not be contained by brick walls and strict schedules. After just a couple of years, he did what any future country music hero, any natural-born wanderer, would do. He ran away. With his brother Justin, he escaped the orphanage, their youthful determination overriding their fear, and they hitchhiked their way back to their grandparents in Mississippi. It was a brief reunion, a temporary respite. But the road, the lure of the open horizon, was already deeply ingrained in his soul. By the time he was a teenager, barely a man, he was already living a life that most people only ever read about in adventure novels. He followed his uncle, a transient worker, out to the dusty, sprawling oil fields of New Mexico. There he became a roughneck. This was brutal, unforgiving, dangerous work. Long, scorching days under the relentless desert sun, wrestling with heavy steel pipes, grappling with powerful, dangerous machinery. It was a world of sweat, of grime, of calloused hands, and the ever-present danger of injury or worse. It was during this formative, nomadic period that music truly took hold, becoming more than just a pastime. He'd learned to play the guitar as a boy, a simple skill he'd picked up along the way, and now, in the lonely stretches of the oil fields, it became his constant companion. It was his escape, his most trusted friend. In the evenings after the grueling work was done, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of orange and purple, he'd sit by a flickering fire and play. the simple chords a soothing balm for his restless, wandering soul. The music wasn't just a hobby, it was a profound lifeline, a tether to something beautiful and pure in an otherwise harsh world. It was the first true glimpse of his destiny. In the mid-1950s, Hank made a pivotal move heading to the West Coast, drawn by the burgeoning and electric music scene there. It was in California that he teamed up with another aspiring musician, a charismatic young man named Eddy Cochran. In a twist of fate that would amusingly confuse people for decades, the two formed a duo called the Cochran Brothers. Despite the name, they were not related by blood, but by a shared passion for a new sound. They played a raw, energetic, genre-bending blend of country and rockabilly, perfectly capturing the rebellious, youthful spirit of the era. They even achieved some minor success, appearing on television and cutting records, but their musical paths, and indeed their destinies, were fundamentally different. Eddy would go on to become a true rock and roll legend with iconic hits like Summertime Blues and Come On Everybody, before his life was tragically cut short in a car crash at the tender age of 21. Hank, however, knew his heart beat to a different rhythm. His soul was pure country, steeped in the storytelling tradition he'd absorbed from the dust bowls and oil fields, and in the late 1950s, for a country songwriter with his kind of talent and vision, there was only one true destination, one shining beacon: Nashville, Tennessee. The story of his arrival in Nashville is the stuff of legend, a classic tale of ambition, talent, and sheer grit. He drove there with another struggling, equally brilliant songwriter who would become his lifelong best friend, his fiercest collaborator, and at times his good-natured rival, the incredible Harlan Howard. The two of them rolled into town with nothing but beat-up guitars, empty pockets, and a belief in their own talent that bordered on glorious insanity. They were hungry, literally and figuratively. They were part of a wave of hungry, brilliant writers, a new generation descending upon Music Row, who were about to fundamentally change the sound and the soul of country music forever. Nashville at that time was undergoing a profound revolution. The raw, gritty, often mournful honky-tonk sound pioneered by legends like Hank Williams was gradually giving way to something smoother, more sophisticated, and undeniably more commercially viable. This evolving style became known famously as the Nashville sound. It featured lush string arrangements, smooth, often ethereal backup vocals, and a polished, almost orchestral production that allowed country music to cross over, for the first time, onto the pop charts. But for this sophisticated new sound to work, to truly resonate and achieve mass appeal, it needed one thing above all else: perfectly crafted songs. Songs with brilliant universal lyrics, unforgettable haunting melodies, and a deep, undeniable emotional appeal that transcended genre. Hank Cochran arrived at the exact serendipitous right moment. He was a perfect, almost miraculous fit for this new era. His roughneck past, his wandering youth, had provided him with an endless, authentic well of stories, of experiences. But his innate genius was not just for lyrical truth. It was for melody, for structure, for the precise architecture of a hit song. He possessed the rare ability to write a song that felt like it had been torn straight from a secret diary, raw and vulnerable, yet was so impeccably constructed, so melodically perfect. It felt like it had always existed, an ancient truth waiting to be unveiled. He and Harlan hustled relentlessly. They slept in their cars, took any odd job they could find to put food on the table. They lived and breathed songwriting, pitching their tunes with a passion bordering on obsession to anyone who would lend an ear, from seasoned producers to fledgling singers. Their determination eventually paid off. Hank landed a coveted job as a staff writer at Pamper Music, a publishing house famously run by the iconic country star Ray Price. The salary was a paltry $50 a week, a sum barely enough to live on, but it was a foothold. It meant he no longer had to make the agonizing choice between eating and putting gas in the car. It meant he could, for the first time, focus entirely on his craft, on the sacred act of writing. And that's when the true magic started to happen. His creativity, once constrained, now flowed freely. The first major hit, the one that would forever etch his name into the annals of country music history, albeit often in a whispered tone, was a song he co-wrote with Harlan Howard, a deceptively simple, devastatingly effective tune called I Fall to Pieces. They pitched it to a fiery, brilliant young singer with a voice that could break your heart from a mile away, a voice that seemed to contain all the sorrow and strength of the world. Her name was Patsy Cline. Incredibly, Patsy hated it at first. She was a honky-tonk queen, used to belting out powerful bluesy numbers. She thought I Fall to Pieces was too slow, too country, too simple. She fought adamantly against recording it, but her astute producer, the legendary Owen Bradley, a man with an almost psychic ear for a hit, saw its undeniable transformative potential. He gently but firmly convinced her to give it a try. The recording session was reportedly a tense one, a battle of wills between artist and material, but what ultimately emerged from that studio was pure, unadulterated alchemy. The song, combined with Patsy's once-in-a-generation soulful voice, was an instant phenomenon. It soared to #1 on the country charts and, groundbreaking for its time, even crossed over to the pop charts, forever blurring the lines between genres. It didn't just make Patsy Cline a superstar, it announced Hank Cochran to Nashville as one of its most important, most exciting new voices. He wasn't just a one-hit wonder, he was a veritable fountain of brilliance, his well of inspiration seemingly bottomless. The stories of his creative process are legendary. One night he awoke in the middle of the night with an idea, a title crystal clear in his mind. She's Got You. He later recounted that the song just poured out of him, almost fully formed, as if dictated by some unseen muse. It was 4 a.m., but he was so electrified by the nascent song, so certain of its power that he couldn't wait. He immediately called Patsy Cline. Her husband, Charlie Dick, answered the phone, understandably annoyed by the ungodly hour. Hank, undeterred, told him to put Patsy on the line. "I've just written your next #1, he declared, his voice brimming with unshakable confidence. Patsy, still half asleep, listened intently as Hank sang the raw, unpolished version of the song to her over the phone. When he was done, there was a long, expectant pause. Then she finally said, "Well, get your butt over here and play it for me properly." She reportedly came down to meet him in her bathrobe, and they worked on finessing the song right there in her living room in the pre-dawn hours. Like I Fall to Pieces, She's Got You was a masterpiece of heartbreak. It captured the devastating, universal feeling of seeing an old lover move on, meticulously cataloging the physical remnants they left behind. The records, the old photographs, the high school class ring, and concluding with that gut punch of a line, "I've got your memory, or has it got me? I've got everything but you. You see, she's got you." It was another massive smash hit, cementing Patsy's legacy and further solidifying Hank's reputation. Hank Cochran was, simply put, on fire. He penned the timeless ballad Make the World Go Away for Ray Price, a song that would later be transformed into a global, iconic phenomenon by the smooth baritone of Eddy Arnold. He wrote A Little Bitty Tear for the unlikely country star Burl Ives, showcasing his incredible versatility. The hits kept coming, each one a perfectly polished gem of emotional storytelling, a testament to his uncanny ability to tap into the deepest human sentiments. He even pursued a respectable singing career of his own. He was signed to a record label, cutting several albums that showcased his own vocal talents. His song Sally Was a Good Old Girl even became a top 20 hit. He possessed a warm, pleasant voice, a natural charm, and a charismatic stage presence. But his own stardom, while genuine, was always destined to be eclipsed by the gargantuan shadow cast by his songwriting. He was a kingmaker, an architect of legends, rather than a king himself. And deep down profoundly, he seemed to be perfectly content with that. His true passion wasn't the fleeting spotlight. It was the quiet, sacred act of creation. A man, a guitar, and a blank piece of paper. That, he often said, was his true kingdom, his most cherished domain. To the outside world, the industry, and a small circle of fans, Hank Cochran was the undisputed hit machine, the Midas of Music Row, capable of turning any idea into gold. But the man behind the songs was far more complex, more turbulent, more deeply human, and often more flawed than his perfectly crafted, emotionally resonant lyrics might suggest. His personal life was a raw, unfiltered testament to the very same themes he so eloquently wrote about: a restless, almost compulsive search for enduring love, fleeting moments of profound connection, and the inevitable, often crushing pain of loss. He was married 6 times to 5 different women. This wasn't simply a matter of scandal or indifference to commitment. It was in many ways quite the opposite. Hank Cochran was, at his core, a hopeless, incurable romantic, a man who fell in love deeply, passionately, and completely, each time believing this was the one. He was constantly chasing an ideal, a perfect, unwavering love he so beautifully described and perhaps perfected in his songs. But the tumultuous life of a professional musician, the late nights, the constant travel, the intoxicating pressures and temptations of the industry, the sheer emotional drain of creation, proved to be an incredibly difficult foundation upon which to build a lasting, peaceful home. One of his most significant and certainly most public relationships was with his fellow country star, the spirited and talented Jeannie Seely. They were, for a time, a quintessential Nashville power couple, 2 bright stars orbiting each other. Both were successful recording artists in their own right, and they shared a deep, undeniable creative bond. They wrote songs together, they performed together, and their passionate love story, often turbulent, played out in the pages of country music magazines, a true Nashville romance. But like many of his relationships, both public and private, it eventually fractured under the immense strain of their careers and their equally strong personalities. Yet remarkably, they remained devoted friends for life, a testament to the genuine affection and respect that underpinned the romance even after it had faded. But perhaps the greatest, most telling insights into Hank's true character, beyond the romance and the hit songs, come from the stories told by his closest friends and colleagues. He was renowned throughout Nashville for his incredible generosity, especially towards other struggling songwriters. He never forgot what it was like to be hungry, broke, and desperately trying to get a foot in the door. He understood the dreams, the desperation, and the immense talent that often existed side by side with crippling poverty. The most famous and perhaps most impactful of these stories involves a young, unknown, and somewhat unconventional songwriter from Texas who had just arrived in Nashville, looking for his big break. This kid was not only broke, he was often sleeping in his car, unable to even get a meeting, let alone a foot in the door. at the powerful publishing houses that controlled so much of the industry. His name was Willie Nelson. Hank, with his uncanny ear and his profound understanding of true talent, immediately recognized the raw, undeniable genius in Willie's unconventional songwriting style, a style that many in Nashville initially dismissed as too different or uncommercial. Hank didn't just offer him empty encouragement, he offered him a tangible lifeline, a path forward. He hired Willie as a staff writer at Pamper Music, paying him that same meager $50 a week salary he himself had started with. It was an act of profound faith, a simple gesture of generosity that quite literally changed the course of country music history, launching one of its most iconic careers. One night, the legend goes, Hank and Willie were hanging out with Harlan Howard and some other struggling musicians at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge, the legendary smoky Nashville watering hole where deals were struck and dreams were born. Willie was, as usual, completely broke, despairing about his financial situation. He cautiously pitched a new song he'd written to Hank, a clever, poignant tune called Hello Walls. Hank, ever the astute judge of material, loved it immediately, recognizing its commercial appeal and its emotional depth. He knew instinctively it wasn't quite right for him to record personally, but he knew exactly who it was for. He believed it would be perfect for the popular smooth-voiced singer Farron Young. Hank, without hesitation, made a call right there from the noisy, crowded bar. He got Farron Young on the phone and, with his characteristic confidence, told him, "Farron, I've got your next number one." Willie, desperate for immediate cash to cover rent and basic necessities, sold his writer's share of the song on the spot for a few $100s, a sum that, at the time, felt like a fortune, enough to keep him afloat. Hello Walls went on to be a massive number one hit for Farron Young, becoming one of his signature songs, and it unequivocally put Willie Nelson on the map as a formidable songwriter. Willie would later, repeatedly, say that Hank Cochran saved his life in those early desperate days. He wasn't just a mentor, he was a literal lifeline, a true guardian angel. This truly was the real Hank Cochran, the man who understood implicitly that talent was something to be nurtured, to be shared, not to be hoarded or guarded. He never lost his sense of empathy for the underdog. He was in many ways the warm, generous heart of the Nashville songwriting community, a genuinely funny, deeply compassionate soul who tirelessly championed other artists, often at his own expense. He possessed an uncanny, almost supernatural ability to hear a song and know with absolute certainty exactly who should sing it, who could bring its emotional core to life. He was a master matchmaker of song and singer, a true alchemist of the music business. Yet, for all the success, the camaraderie, the legendary parties, there was always that lingering shadow of the boy from the orphanage. A deep-seated, almost congenital loneliness, a profound vulnerability that he so brilliantly, so painfully channeled into his music. He could write from a woman's perspective or from the perspective of a heartbroken lover with startling, almost unsettling empathy precisely because he understood the intricate, delicate anatomy of a broken heart better than anyone. He laid his own pain, his own yearning, his own fragile hope bare for the world to see, and then with remarkable selflessness, he let someone else sing it, giving voice to universal human experience through their interpretations. The final chapter of Hank Cochran's extraordinary life is perhaps the most moving, the most profound, and the most revealing of all. In the early 2000s, this titan of songwriting received a devastating diagnosis: pancreatic cancer, a brutal and often swift disease that leaves little room for hope. He faced his own mortality not with despair, but with the same quiet dignity, the same unwavering honesty, and the same fundamental grit that had defined his entire life, from the Mississippi Delta to the Nashville sound stages. During this incredibly difficult and painful period, almost miraculously, he found a love that was, by all accounts, his truest anchor, his most enduring peace. He had reconnected with and then remarried his third wife, Susie, who became his devoted caretaker, his steadfast companion, and his emotional bedrock through his final challenging years. Theirs was a powerful, tender love story forged in the very shadow of death, a bond that gave him immense strength, comfort, and an undeniable sense of peace he had perhaps sought his entire life. But Hank Cochran did not simply passively fade away. He was a songwriter to his very core. It wasn't just what he did for a living, it was who he was at the deepest level of his being. And he continued to write, to create, even as the cancer relentlessly ravaged his body, weakening him physically. He held court from his sickbed, his mind as sharp, as insightful, and as creatively vibrant as it had ever been. Young, aspiring songwriters, even seasoned veterans, would make pilgrimages to his home, not to pity him, but to learn from him, to simply be in his presence, to soak up his wisdom, his unique understanding of the human heart set to music. There is a particularly poignant story from this time that perfectly encapsulates his unwavering spirit, his undiminished passion for his craft. His old trusted writing partner, Dean Dillon, came to visit him. Hank was frail, but the creative fire, that insatiable urge to write, was still burning brightly in his eyes. He looked at Dean, a spark of his old mischievous genius flashing, and pitched him a new song idea. The title was He's Got You. The long and courageous fight finally ended on the morning of July 15th, 2010. Garland Perry Hank Cochran passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by his devoted wife, Susie, and family. He was 74. In that moment, a hush seemed to fall over Nashville. The news of his death did not hit Nashville like a sudden violent storm, but rather like a deep, resonant chord. It was the undeniable end of an era. A quiet giant, a sonic architect of the city, was gone. The response from the music community was profound and deeply personal. It was not just a chorus of grief, but also of deep gratitude. His longtime and closest friend, Willie Nelson, whose career was launched by Hank's faith and generosity, expressed a sentiment that many echoed. He was my brother, my friend, my mentor. The world would be a dull place without him. Jeannie Seeley, his ex-wife and lifelong friend, mourned the loss of the man with whom she shared so much of her life and music, praising his big heart and unparalleled talent. Legends whose careers were built on his songs, artists like George Strait, Loretta Lynn, and Merle Haggard, issued statements honoring the man who gave them some of their most iconic hits. They spoke of him not just as a great writer, they spoke of him as a friend, a character, a generous soul who was the heart of their community. His passing left a creative and spiritual void that seemed impossible to fill. But perhaps the most powerful reaction was the one that played quietly in millions of homes and cars around the world. To the average fan, the name Hank Cochran might not be immediately recognizable, but his songs had become a part of their lives. In the hours that followed, radio stations across the country and even around the world began playing his music in tribute. Hank Cochran's core legacy is his role as one of the founding architects of modern country music. He created a template for songwriting, combining simple, heartfelt lyrics with deep emotion to tell universal human stories about love, loss, and hope. The result is a treasure trove of timeless songs that not only became huge hits for legends like Patsy Cline, George Strait, but also connected directly with listeners, making them feel understood and not alone. Although he has been inducted into various Hall of Fames, his true legacy is the songs that have stood the test of time and continue to touch the hearts of generations.